So hello, everybody. Um, oops. So my name is Gowan Batist, and I am the Mountain Lion Foundation's Coexistence Programs Manager. And we have a monthly webinar series where we delve into specific coexistence topics. This presentation is a little bit different. We're going to be doing a deep dive into the practical details of ranching with wildlife. And so for some of you, this might be a totally new topic. As we go through, please feel free to type questions in the chat. Please feel free to ask clarifying questions. There are no questions that I'm not happy to have. And that's really true. You can ask the most basic question or the most complex question, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. To give you a little bit about me and my background, I am a sheep rancher. We raise Finn sheep, which are a heritage fiber breed of sheep. They come in all sorts of really beautiful colors. I'm a sheep shearer, have been since I was a teenager. I'm a fiber artist. I'm a participant in our local Farmers Market Association. I've been on the board of CAF, which is one of the biggest family farming associations in California. I served on the board for several terms. My term just expired. So I've been involved in agriculture in California for my whole life, and I'm still actively farming today. For a lot of my 20s, I was you sometimes see those big crews of goats and sheep grazing along highways to control fire risk. I was one of those folks. And these days, we're mostly on our home ranch, which is 40 acres. And then we also graze an additional about 40 acres of surrounding neighbor land. So that's who I am. I also happen to live smack dab in the most dense mountain lion population in California, according to the most recent survey. So, as we get into this, I want to start with some agreements and assumptions. Our agreement is that we prioritize human safety and the safety of domestic animals. Nobody is going to say that humans have to be at risk or that animals have to be at risk and that that's just the way that it is. We are making sure that we're putting a high value on the safety of people and the safety of domestic animals. We follow the law. We're going to talk about techniques and tools that follow California law. And we'll also talk about some areas where maybe policy needs to change, and that's okay too. We follow the recommendations of the most rigorous and current rangeland science. There are some things that people anecdotally repeat to me that work for them, and they're interesting, and I might pass some of those along, but we don't officially recommend anything that's not peer reviewed. So we'll be talking about studies that are showing that these tools and techniques work or don't work. So we're using scientific methods. And we remain open to new studies and emerging scientific consensus and ground-tested ranch methodology. So we're going to have an open mind, but we're going to follow the science and the research. You might notice that nowhere on there does it say that you have to love mountain lions. I personally, I'm not here to be a salesperson for mountain lions, for wildlife. I think people can do fantastic coexistence work and absolutely hate mountain lions. And I think people can love mountain lions and do a whole lot of harm, either through negligent behavior with their livestock, through unsafe behavior like approaching and filming kittens. Loving or not loving mountain lions has nothing to do with whether or not you do a good job at doing coexistence. And this webinar is about doing coexistence work. So introducing the mountain lion. So the mountain lion is Puma concolor. Concolor means one color. This nifty little chart here shows the mountain lion in comparison to other very recently native cats of the United States. The Pleistocene era just ended. It's an evolutionary blink of an eye ago. Cougars are in the fossil record for around 300 million years here. They've been here forever. They've been alongside humans for at least 30,000 years, and every time they find new evidence, it gets longer. So they are cats that have evolved in an environment with a lot of bigger, stronger, gnarlier predators. Of the cats on the screen, all of them are extinct except the jaguar. And jaguars did have some presence in the Southwest. There's occasionally a potential sighting still, but as of now, cougars are really the last cat standing that we're going to talk about significantly. But because they have this evolutionary niche of having co-evolved in this environment of actually being the smallest cat on the landscape, that seems to contribute to why they're actually relatively cowardly. A lot of their survival strategy is about stealth. Mountain lion range. So they have the largest range of any cat species from Canada to Chile. Most US mountain lion populations currently are in the West. They've been functionally extinct east of the Mississippi since around the turn of the century, except for that tiny little red dot you can see in Florida. But everywhere that is yellow was past mountain lion habitat. And there is some evidence that they're returning east. Individual male mountain lions can travel a very, very far distance. In fact, one specific juvenile male traveled over 3,000 miles from the Black Hills of South Dakota up around the Great Lakes, ended up in Connecticut, where he was hit and killed by a car. So individual males absolutely can and do travel great distances east. That does not mean that there's a population there. So we might say that, sure, you could see a mountain lion in the eastern United States. There isn't a breeding population there. So behavior. So mountain lions are obligate carnivores. What that means is that they only eat meat. Most of their diet as adults are deer, but juveniles absolutely can eat small mammals. They can eat raccoons. They actually are known to eat coyotes. They have even been seen to hunt fish and eat fish in some cases. Juveniles may also eat rodents and even insects. So when they're younger, their diet's a lot more varied. It tends to be smaller animals. As they get older, they tend to specialize more in deer. Once they're 3+, you may occasionally see them take down an elk. But that's generally the range. They're a lot more social than we once thought. Mountain lions live in communities. They tend to occupy territories of 4 or 5 females in an area that may have some overlap between their territories, and then one established male will have a larger territory that covers all of those female territories. That's when things are stable and their population is good. There's new game camera evidence showing mountain lions sharing kills with each other, mountain lions with big groups of kittens. So they're not quite as solitary as we once saw. However, kittens stay with their mother for a long time. I will very often in my job capacity get emails saying there's a pack of mountain lions and they're hunting in packs now. And they'll send me a picture and it'll be a mother mountain lion and 3 cubs. And that's almost always what you're seeing. If you see more than one mountain lion, it's almost always a mother and cubs. Part of the reason why they all may look like adults is mountain lions will often stay with their mothers for up to 2 years. And there's very little sexual dimorphism in mountain lions. The females and the males look a lot alike. So mountain lions are crepuscular, which means they're most active at dusk and dawn. They're most active at dusk and dawn, but you can see them any time of the day or night. Oftentimes seeing a mountain lion during the day will bring on a lot of fear in people because it seems unpredictable or unfamiliar. People associate these animals with the nighttime. But that's just a human association. Most sightings happen during the day for the simple reason that that's because that's when humans are out and about. Mountain lions can be active any time of the day or night. So talking about mountain lion behavior during threat. So when threatened, a mountain lion may run, but it's actually much more often that they walk away. This comes up a lot when people have a sighting. It's very unnerving when you come face to face with a mountain lion on a trail and you expect them to act kind of like a deer acts, which is to spook and bolt. And instead they don't do that. They look at you and they walk away slowly, very disdainfully, much like a domestic house cat can. That can feel really, really scary. And I've been in that situation plenty of times myself. But that's really normal for a mountain lion. Mountain lions will really run as a last resort. Um, Mountain lions may actually sit down when they feel threatened, relying on their coat to camouflage them. And sometimes they yawn as a stress response. And so when they yawn, they show their teeth. And I've had multiple people email me and say, it sat down and it showed its teeth. And when I asked them to describe it, what it did is yawn. And yawning is often a stress reaction, which cats and dogs, domestic dogs as well, will do. So that is often what a mountain lion encounter actually looks like. Mountain lions may not sprint away from you. They may walk away from you slowly. They may take some distance and sit down and watch you. Mountain lions are actually really good at following the same advice we give people about how to deal with them. We tell people never to run from a mountain lion, to stand your ground and slowly increase your distance. Mountain lions do the same thing to us, for the simple reason that they're very used to being hunted. That's in their evolutionary past, and that's in their ancestral behavior. So very rarely a mountain lion may bluff charge, or attack. I've been bluff charged. It's very dramatic and it's very, very intense, but it's not hunting behavior. And what that can look like is a big pounce with a big paw stamp and a lot of display. And what that usually is like, that's a cat that feels cornered, feels like it can't have enough space to turn and run, and is trying to create distance. And I've been in that situation. It's very scary. However, we all walked away unharmed, and the reason for that was by following the rules that we set out for how to handle an encounter like this. So that's general behavior. You can't necessarily expect a mountain lion to turn and run. Sometimes they sit, sometimes they yawn, sometimes they bluff. Very, very, very rarely one may actually attack. In the case of an actual mountain lion attack, our recommendation is to fight back, especially to fight back and target the eyes and the head. And in most cases where actual physical contact is made, humans have been able to successfully deter that attack. There's actually been a record of an 8-year-old boy successfully deterring an attack. Most of the time, they want nothing to do with us. So, in the colonial era, the stated goal of our government was extermination of the mountain lion. It succeeded temporarily east of the Mississippi. It never succeeded in the West, despite a bounty system that would pay people for sets of mountain lion ears. Individual hunters, some killed hundreds, if not thousands, of mountain lions. Teddy Roosevelt was actually quoted as being really disappointed by how poor of a sport mountain lions actually were, because they would really attempt to get away from people and were not the kind of African lion hunting experience that he hoped that they would be. He considered them very cowardly. And they were persecuted nearly to non-existence. So this is a reason why I often kind of say that like our only option is proactive coexistence, is that we have already tried extermination. It didn't work, and extermination is no longer a legal option on the table. So mountain lions are here, and we need to learn how to manage that in the safest way possible for all involved. So cougar bounties were part of the Animal Damage Control Program in 1931. So that branch of the USDA paid people to kill mountain lions. So, and that went on from the early 1900s to the 1980s. So I was born in 1988. You know, most of us on this webinar here tonight were probably alive in the 1980s when this still existed. So we are in the still fairly near aftermath of that policy. So beginning in the 1960s, most Western states shifted to a game management model, some more or less successfully. In the 1990s, California became the first state to ban hunting. There are other states, such as Nebraska, where mountain lion hunting is often opened up before a population has even reestablished, where mountain lions are heading west or heading east. There are places like Texas where there's absolutely no protections. Um, Things really vary all across the country. So, why do we care about mountain lions at all? Why is any of this relevant? Mountain lions are really crucial to ecosystems. They play a very important role in overall ecosystem health and in biodiversity. So this is a study from Ripple and Deshta in 2006, which is a study that I think is very, very impactful. They looked at places in Zion National Park that both had and didn't have mountain lion populations and surveyed all kinds of species from overstory species like trees to shrubs to butterflies and insects, even to marine or aquatic invertebrates and beetles. And what they found is that across the board, areas with mountain lions had overall more biodiversity than areas without. And the difference between areas that had more mountain lions and had less mountain lions was the amount of human traffic, because mountain lions will go so far out of their way to avoid humans generally. This is what ended up happening. In some states, such as South Dakota, where mountain lions have recently been introduced, their impact on an overpopulated deer population has actually brought down human deaths from vehicle strikes on deer and saved about $1.2 million a year. So we have them to thank for that, but we also have them to thank for managing a deer population the way a mountain lion does rather than how human hunters do. We'll often hear people say that, they really want to save the deer and save the elk for human hunters, that mountain lions are competing with them. Mountain lions don't generally think the way that human hunters do. Mountain lions want the weakest, oldest, sickest deer. They're not looking for trophy bucks. There's some emerging evidence that they target deer who are sick with Lyme disease and who are sick with chronic wasting disease, neither of which they seem to contract. And so in states with really bad, for instance, chronic wasting disease issues where, private hunters are being hired just to euthanize sick deer, well, mountain lions will do it for free. And as a side effect, have this incredibly rejuvenating effect on the whole understory of an overpopulated environment as far as deer. And part of that is their cache sites. Over 100 different animals rely on mountain lion caches. That's part of why beetle biodiversity is so much higher in areas where mountain lions are. So they can have a really positive role in the environment, including for humans and human safety. Many, many more people are injured and killed by deer vehicle strikes than by mountain lions, which, very sadly, we have had our 28th human fatality recently, but that's since the 1890s. Hundreds of people are killed every year in deer vehicle strikes, on the other hand. Okay, so dispersal and territory. I covered that a little bit in behavior. I got a little ahead of myself, so sorry about that. But this is just a visual representation. You'll have one established adult male and then territories of adult females within it with some slight overlap between them. This is a really important chart, and I would love it if y'all just take a second to really think about this and then think about what happens if that stable adult male is killed. What happens is that the population trends younger. And what happens is often very chaotic, and often dangerous for all involved. So when a established territorial male is removed from the ecosystem, what happens is there's an influx of adolescent males. Those adolescent males often will kill kittens and may engage in fights with females who are protecting her kittens, sometimes resulting in her death, which will leave orphaned kittens. They're in the Tetons, the Panthera following collared cougars noted a case of that happening. There was an adult male, M29, who was legally hunted, I believe in October of 2013. And he had two females, F51 and F61, whose territories he covered. And he had been seen on camera sharing kills with them and their kittens. He was not a threat to their kittens. They were cooperating perfectly fine with him. And they'd raised successful sets of kittens. And we're not having conflicts with humans. It was a very heavily trafficked part of the park, and they had no problems. He was legally killed by a hunter. What happened next was that a younger male, about half the age of the two females, moved in, attacked F51, and killed her, and her two 7-month-old kittens starved to death. One of them starved to death without causing any incidents with humans. The remaining one followed and aggressively approached hikers multiple times before dying. So that, that is a documented and known outcome because these lions happened to be part of a study and they were collared. They were able to follow and watch what happened. But multiply that by all of the hunting tags across all of those states, and you start to see that the impact and the outcomes are much different than they might look on paper. I'm going to say this a lot of times in this presentation, but ecosystems are not arithmetic. If you have 9 lions and you remove one, you don't then have 8 lions. You may have 12 lions because you have new lions coming in. You may have 6 lions because the remaining lions are thrown into social chaos and kill each other. It's not arithmetic. There are complex and emergent outcomes. So habitat and prey. Deer. The main prey of a mountain lion is deer, from subadults all the way throughout their lives. Some mature individuals may be able to hunt elk in areas where there are elk. Mostly they eat deer. Juveniles and very young mountain lions may eat rodents, may eat raccoons, may eat coyotes, but mostly it's deer. So the number one most important thing that you can do to keep your community safe from mountain lions is to not feed deer. I've been to Amador County consulting on several farms and ranches there, right on the border with El Dorado County. And, getting out of my car, I was literally approached by a group of about 12 deer who walked right up to me, like within touching distance, and clearly expected to be fed and were quite upset with me that I was not offering them anything, only to have the homeowner come out and tell me that, oh, of course they don't feed deer, but all their neighbors do. Same thing with wild turkeys. Which are a huge salmonella risk for domestic animals, but also can be targeted by cougars as well. I saw some of the worst examples of deer feeding that I've ever seen in my entire life when I was there and in my whole career. It's very, very alarming. It's really not okay. It's really not safe. In general, a population of 360 deer is required to support one lion. So lion behavior, usually they have very large ranges. It can be anywhere from 25 to 400 square miles. And usually the general rule is the more arid the environment, the bigger the territorial range. What that means is that a mountain lion will be moving all the time. A mountain lion is not usually going to camp out in one place. The exception to that is if there is an ongoing food source in that one place. If deer are hanging around because they're being fed, they're not dispersing and leaving the area after a mountain lion kills one, then the mountain lion will also hang around. And where the deer go, mountain lions go. I have game camera footage all the time of mountain lions on people's porches and people's driveways, and that's where the deer were. I later on in this slide deck, there's a picture of a deer that was killed on someone's porch. So please, please, please don't feed deer. Ideal mountain lion habitat is a gentle slope with cover. So that's the foothills. That is the kind of environment that they like to be in. Oh, and you know what I said about 360 deer, it doesn't mean they eat 360 deer. It means that's about the size of a population that it'll take to sustain that population of deer and then have a mountain lion predation on that deer in an ongoing way. And generally speaking, when a mountain lion hunts a deer, they'll cache that deer, which means they'll take the carcass and they'll hide it under twigs and leaves. And then they'll hang out in an area from anywhere from like 5 to 8 days usually and eat that deer. And during the time period where they're eating a deer, they're usually pretty relaxed. They may be more likely to be seen because they're not hunting, they're not being stealthy. They already have what they want. I've had somebody that I helped with this situation, but they had a deer that had killed, they had a deer that had been killed at the bottom of their lawn, and the mountain lion was just laying on their lawn like a big cat, guarding its cache. So that's not unusual behavior. So this picture, these are bighorn sheep, and that's a golf course. This is in Nevada. So when prey animals seek refuge from drought and fire, when they go where there's irrigation, then predators follow them. So you know, these are bighorns. They're not supposed to be there, and you could get a mountain lion following them in. So when deer come into neighborhoods, come up driveways, come onto people's porches because they're getting fed, either intentionally or they're eating your bird feeders or they're eating your dropped domestic animal feed, that is pulling mountain lions after them into those same spaces. Mountain lions go where the prey goes. They don't have any other options. And then this is a water drop. So, drought is a huge factor in this, drought and fire. We'll talk about fire in a little bit. So hunting and population management. We talked about this a little bit, but can you tell the sex of that mountain lion that is up in that tree? Me either. So mountain lions have a very low level of sexual dimorphism. There's a couple tricks that people who work with them all the time can use, but they're not always super reliable. There are particularly blocky-headed, big-shouldered females and particularly narrow-faced and slender males. Females have kittens about 80% of the time throughout their whole life. So an adult female has kittens most of the time, but they're often not with her. They're often stashed. And if that female gets killed, then those kittens are usually doomed. And like in the very sad case in the Tetons, can become a public health threat. So for me personally, from working with livestock alongside mountain lions for all of these years, from showing up in cases of depredations, helping ranchers out, installing deterrent devices, going all the places that I've gone, the only mountain lions that make me nervous are adolescents that are orphaned. That they tend to be the category of lions that get into trouble. It's really just like any other teenager. They're big enough to have really big consequences. They're big enough to make really big mistakes, but they're not mature enough to be able to understand what those consequences will be. And our best bet is to let the population self-regulate. Adult mountain lions have a very strong suppressive effect on juvenile mountain lions. This is something that is, again, with the ecosystems are not arithmetic. This is often really difficult, um, because it doesn't seem to make sense. It's very counterintuitive logically. The idea should be if you're having a problem mountain lion and you take that mountain lion away, then you take the problem away. But the problem is that whole area can become a sink for young lions, particularly young male lions, when you see a lot of lethal removal of adults. And that increases conflict. It doesn't decrease it. The best rangeland science that we have right now shows that lethal removal of adult lions causes an increase in threat to domestic livestock and threat to humans. And that's why I'm here right now. I am a sheep rancher. If I was not thoroughly convinced by both the logic of that, seeing it play out on the landscape myself, and also looking at the science, I probably wouldn't do this job. So that is what has convinced me to move into a proactive coexistence lens. And I'm hoping we can work through how to do that together here. So carrying on, I also wanted to say a little bit about fire. I was listening to the Board of Supervisors meeting, and this is a collared lion study in the Santa Monica Mountains. So the thing about fire, and the comment that was made, is that, all the regrowth is just beautiful. It's like deer candy. There's got to be a lot of deer up there. Why haven't the mountain lions moved back into the post-fire area? What this collared lion study showed is that mountain lions did not return to the burned area for years. That they were very, very hesitant to move back into an area post-burn, and that in the aftermath of a burn, they tended to be seen during the day much more often. There's a 16% increase in daytime sightings. They engaged in riskier behavior, such as crossing roads more often. They depredated livestock and domestic animals much more often. And in general, their behavior was much more chaotic, with interspecies violence, mountain lions killing mountain lions much more frequently than they had been pre-fire. When we're looking at these really tragic and scary things that are being reported in El Dorado and Amador County, that mountain lions are being seen during the day, that they're being seen much more frequently, it matches up exactly with the results of this collared study. I think that there is an explanation for that behavior, and more knowledge and more science is very, very much needed. I would love to see a collared lion study in that area. But considering the very large wildfires that came through the area so recently, there is scientific precedent for exactly the kinds of things that we're seeing, where we're having more daytime sightings, more depredations. And you would think that mountain lions would go right back into the post-burn area when the deer do. And they don't. They wait for that secondary canopy cover to recover. They don't go back when it's in the shoot regrowth phase. That is what we're seeing. So, mountain lions and humans. Mountain lions and humans. We have a lot of positive outcomes from mountain lions, both in terms of this umbrella that they provide for a lot of other species, and also they save human lives by reducing deer population and vehicle strikes. $1.2 million a year in South Dakota. South Dakota has a population of only about 800,000. California is 32 million and rising. So you have to, extrapolate how much greater the effect is here versus a place with such a low population. However, there are also conflicts. So encounters in urban areas, especially during drought and post-wildfire, use of home cameras means that there's a perception of invasion. There's a perception that there's just a greater increase in mountain lions than there's been before. That also came up in the Woolsey fire study. that there was a reported belief of an increase in population. It's not what the collaring study actually found, that there weren't actually more individuals, but they were being seen much more frequently. Partially it was because they were coming during the day more often than they usually do because of hunting different animals. And mostly not cats and dogs, mostly actually small mammals. But and also birds. But there's this perception. And part of that is this is an advertisement. I actually got this advertisement. Um, uh, Catch prowlers and howlers, you know. There are cameras everywhere now. And that's a new thing. You know, these were not available on the market um, even as recently as 5 or 10 years ago. So um, we're seeing them now, and that is new. Um, there's been a huge increase in sightings. So there's tangible benefits, there's intrinsic benefits. There are also some really real conflicts that are important to be keeping balanced and in mind as we go forward. So California mountain lion law. So we don't allow sport hunting, and we have a three-strike rule. Mountain lions need to be caught in the act if you're going to take lethal action, followed by an immediate call to CDFW with an autopsy and investigation. So what that means, and I've been on ranches a bunch of times, and one in particular where a rancher was actually giving a presentation and a tour to a big group of people and said, "Oh yeah, I shoot mountain lions." And what she said is, "Well, I'm a rancher, I have an ag business. I am legally allowed to use lethal force if an animal is harassing my livestock. I consider it harassment to set foot on my ranch. So I'm allowed to shoot that mountain lion." And that put me in a terrible position because I'm there as another sheep rancher, you know. So I spoke to this rancher after the talk and was like, you know, please don't incriminate yourself like that in public and in these big groups of people because you're absolutely wrong. You do not have the legal right to shoot a mountain lion just because it's crossing your land. What in the act means is that a mountain lion is posing an imminent threat to your livestock or yourself, that there's an attack happening. And then, yes, you are allowed to use lethal force to protect yourself, to protect your animals. You're absolutely allowed to do that. But what you're supposed to do afterwards is call CDFW, report the incident, and have them come out and they'll take the cat and do a necropsy. And that is really, really important. We want the data. You know, shoot, shovel, and shut up is a problem for all kinds of reasons. But one of the biggest reasons is because we lose the information. Was that cat sick? Was that cat injured? Was that cat inbred? We lose all of that if that cat's body just gets dumped. You know, we want to know that. What the three-strike rule means is, first of all, you have to have done something proactive to protect your livestock. If your livestock are just standing outside in a pen, you will not get a permit. And there has to be multiple instances by the same lion. So you have to have a cat that's truly a problem cat, a cat that's not just taking advantage of an opportunity, because that isn't actually outside of their normal behavior. It is a normal behavior for a cat for them to take advantage of an easy to get sheep. So needs to actually be a nuisance animal. It needs to actually be a problem and actually be a threat. And they determine that a couple different ways. Now, something that came up in the Board of Supervisors meeting that I actually really agree with was that the way that the law is currently written is really, it was intended for large parcels when it was written. That's who they had in mind, was large ranchers. And they didn't take into account the fact that a lot of folks nowadays, because there's so much more development now on the urban rural fringe, they live on 5-acre parcels or 10-acre parcels, and they might have a mountain lion that's having conflicts with 3 or 4 neighbors in a row down these small parcels. CDFW considers each of those a first-time offense. And so understandably, people in the community and people in the neighborhood feel like that's illogical and that clearly there is a repeated pattern, especially given that their territories can be, you know, literally thousands of acres. So I agree. I think that that's a good point, and I think that that is a place where policy change needs to be seriously considered. Because a mountain lion that is hitting the same neighborhood in all kinds of different places is a habituated mountain lion. What I would say is that the first step there is to deter that mountain lion and to change the husbandry practices that are allowing those depredations to occur, that needs to be priority one. But yeah, you might truly have a problem cat there. And so, we agree on that. And that was a point that I heard get made, and I think it's really reasonable. So we're gonna get into the nitty-gritty here, and so I want to start with some misconceptions. First of all, only urban activists promote non-lethal management. My town has, oh, I mean, it's not even really a town, it's unincorporated. There's maybe 250 of us. I was born in a town with less than 500 people. I've worked on farms and ranches for pretty much my whole career. And I've been sheep ranching for forever. And I promote non-lethal management because it works. And it works a lot better than anything else does. So the reality is that successful ranchers use non-lethal management. Uh, Lethal management is a revenge system. It doesn't bring your animal back. You still have the death to begin with. Like we're trying to prevent that loss, prevent that loss of money, prevent that loss of time. So non-lethal means accepting livestock loss. No, it doesn't. I have not had a livestock depredation in years. And when I was growing up, and when before we started implementing these, when I was just starting out for myself in my early 20s, we had about the same rate of loss that everybody has. We had around 10 to 15% of lambs, mostly to coyotes, every single year. And now we don't. So no, that's not true. Non-lethal practices are much more effective because they actually stop it before it happens. Another misconception, the biggest threat to livestock is native predators. Nope. According to 2015 USDA study, predator losses are only 1.1% of cow deaths, 5.8% of calf deaths, 19% of adult sheep deaths, 45% of unintended lamb deaths. So obviously the most vulnerable animal is a lamb, which we raise, and we don't have lamb depredations. I can't even tell you, like, it's been probably 6 years. So, oh yeah, 6 years ago, I think a raven got one. 4, the biggest threat to predators is ranching. No. Climate change and habitat conservation are major threats, and ranches actually provide really important refugia from those threats. So ranch land being there can be really critical to native animals as well. And 5, coexistence advocates aren't tough enough. So this picture, that's literally coyote fur. This is my picture. And that's something that I set up. They were having coyotes depredate calves during calving. So we surrounded just their calving paddock with this very, very hot electric fence. And that coyote learned a very spicy lesson, but it got to live to learn that lesson. Something else that people will say is that these predators aren't afraid of us because we don't have hunting. Dead animals don't learn anything. Living animals learn. So, again, like we said at the beginning, you don't have to love mountain lions. You don't have to love coyotes. It's okay to zap them on their little noses, because that is actually a loving act. They will survive and they will go on to be able to pass their genes on and pass their culture along, because, these are sophisticated animals. They stay with their mothers a very long time. They learn from them. And if what they learn from them is that livestock are not worth the risk, well, then you just created a good neighbor, and that's worth its weight in gold. So California mountain lion depredation permits. So lions killed, according to Wildlife Service records, 1,236. Necropsies actually performed were only 337. They're supposed to do a necropsy every time. Obviously, they don't. But according to all of this aggregate data, in 2015, This was all looked at, and what they concluded was that less than 25% of the necropsied animals actually had the targeted species in their stomach or had a DNA match. So what that would mean is, if there's hair or saliva on an animal carcass, that they can get a DNA match from the cougar that was actually killed, it's about 1 in 4 that they're actually getting the right one. So again, lethal removal is chaotic itself. Remember the huge territories. These animals move really quickly across huge landscapes, often really difficult to access landscapes. So you may not get the right cougar. And even if you do get a cougar, it may turn out that it was not, in fact, actually a cougar. And we'll get a little bit more into the details of that. But it's a very inefficient system. This was an internal study. This was not a bleeding heart wildlife activist study. This was the trapping program's own study concluded that only about 25% of the cougars that they killed were confirmed to actually be the culprit in that case. So if only about 25% of the cougars actually did it, how do we tell? So this chart comes from Cheetah Conservation Botswana. It's one of my favorite charts because they really, really get into it. And I know it's probably small on your screen, but these are people who have been ranching alongside a plethora of large, dangerous carnivores for literally millennia. And we have so much to learn from ranchers in places like Botswana, where there's a huge amount of research coming out. There's also a fantastic holistic management hub in Zimbabwe that's doing a similar thing of capturing these traditional ranching techniques, technologies, and ways of understanding and putting them out into the world. And they're really doing a fantastic job. But if you look at this chart, it starts with a domestic dog and then goes down the caracal, jackal, cheetah, leopard, brown hyena, spotted hyena, African lion, African wild dog, bat-eared fox, aardwolf, serval, honey badger, porcupine, and vulture. So that's a lot of potential predators. It looks at their paws, their prey carcass location, the prey that they eat, what their claw marks look like, whether or not they eat the stomach, which is a huge diagnostic thing, bite location, bite width, parts of the animal affected, whether or not they eat bones, other evidence. This is fantastic. I would love to make a chart like this for North America, but there's something I feel like North Americans might be a little bit more delicate than Botswanans about this particular thing. But I love how frank this is. So we're gonna move forward with some predator identification. These videos are all real videos that I have been sent in my capacity as coexistence programs manager. And they have all been sent to me asking for a positive ID of, is this a mountain lion? So is this a mountain lion? You can put it in the chat if you want, or I will spoiler it in just a minute here. I think for those who are playing at home here, let's watch it again. Is that a mountain lion? So let's see the barring on the legs, the white dots on the back of the ears. The short tail, that's a bobcat. That's a classic bobcat. So what about this guy? So that's a gray fox. And unfortunately, he didn't make a bunch of sound for us in this one, but I get sent audio recordings a lot of the time. And foxes sound like a very operatic version of what people think mountain lions would sound like. They make an incredibly loud, very scary sound, and most of them are just these tiny little guys. But they make a much louder sound than mountain lions do. Okay, what about this one?
Oh my God, Tim. That's mountain lion. Right?
Want to see that one again? It's only like 6 seconds.
My God, Tim. That's mountain lion. Right?
That's a domestic cat. And I don't include this to make fun of anybody. Um, this was sent to me in earnest, people asking this question, and it happens I had many to choose from. Um, it's really difficult to tell scale at a distance. And mountain lions are cats. They look a lot like domestic cats. So that's a house cat.
My God, Tim. That's mountain lion.
That's a cat. That's mountain lion. And if you wait for it, there's another mountain lion. So looking at this video, and there's a couple of clips here because they walked through multiple home security zones. Who do you think that these two are? What could their relationship to each other be? You got the one in the front, slightly smaller than the one in the back. The most likely is that this is a mother mountain lion and a juvenile traveling together. There are other things it could be. It could be two juveniles, one of whom is slightly bigger than the other, that have recently emancipated from their mother but are still traveling together. That happens. They often stay together for a while before they end up going on to their new territories. It could be a female and a male who are planning to breed. But most likely it's a mother and her cub. People will often, again, I'll get this fairly frequently. They're traveling in packs now. I really promise that they're not. It's the same behavior that they've always done. Okay, so we're gonna really get into it now. So this is Barnyard CSI. So this is a good time to take a 10-minute break if you don't want to see pictures of injured and dead animals, because that is what's happening next. And I understand that this stuff can be upsetting. I look at it a lot, so but it still upsets me. So I really get it. Nobody has to be tough about this. But this is how we can like really proactively talk about what we're looking at. So mountain lion kills. So this deer, the family who live on the property where this happened had actually had me out to visit the week before, and they live in Amador County, right on near the border with El Dorado, and they have a large koi pond in their backyard, and they had deer coming to their koi pond to drink, and then they saw a mountain lion in their yard. And I advised them that they would very likely have mountain lions in their yard unless they were willing to put a deer fence around the pond. Because, it's a small koi pond, but this is a dry environment in the middle of summer. Deer are coming to get water. Mountain lions are going to go where the deer are. So this was just feet from their patio. And, the mountain lion took off as soon as they came outside in the morning. But this is not an unusual behavior. And this is a very classic mountain lion pattern. You can see that there's some telltale things going on here. You can see the kind of superflexion of the head and neck. You can see this pile over here in the top right corner of rumen and guts that were taken out of the body and taken away. That is really, that's a really clear sign that you've got a mountain lion. Dogs and bears will eat those stomach contents and intestines, and mountain lions will not. You can also see how much meat has been eaten just in one night. And then you can see the ends of the ribs are eaten. A good way to tell the difference between bobcat and mountain lions is mountain lions will eat bone ends and bobcats won't. This mountain lion got interrupted because this person came outside and the mountain lion left. But if they had an opportunity, they would probably cache this deer, which means, drag it into the bushes and pile twigs and grass on top of it and then hang out nearby it um, for several days while they finish eating it. So these slides make me sad, but on the left here, that is a sheep that was killed by a mountain lion, and it's cached. So you can see that it's covered with grass. Unfortunately, they trapped and killed that cat. They posted about this in a sheep ranching group that I'm in, and it didn't reach out to us first. So the cat that did that was killed. Not in California, so no requirements to have proactive coexistence first. They can kill on a first offense in Nevada. But it's really classic, right? It's if you were a mountain lion, that would be a very stealthy way of hiding. Dogs, on the other hand, on the right here, these wounds come from a dog attack. And this was a dog attack on a group of about 20 sheep. And there were multiple fatalities, and then also sheep that were alive but badly injured. And what you see in dog attacks, dogs harass livestock. The dogs leave multiple small wounds to the legs, the armpit, and the face. Dogs don't cache. So they won't pile up neat twigs and branches over a carcass. Dogs might tear open organs, but they're much more chaotic. They scatter them around. They might break the intestines. They might eat some of the stomach contents. They don't remove them the way that mountain lions do. Most depredations that I respond to are actually dogs. There are about 16 million dogs in California, and on the upper limit, there's only about 4,500 mountain lions in the whole state. I know some people claim that there's more of them. We have good tracking evidence that there's not. We're talking, several thousand mountain lions across the entire state, millions and millions of dogs. And then there's coyotes. And then in parts of the northeast of the state, there's wolves and there's black bears. Black bears also cache, but they may cache with dirt, which mountain lions will never cache with dirt. Mountain lions will also fur pluck. They'll pull fur out in order to just remove it from the carcass. Dogs will wool pluck as a way of harassing sheep, but it won't be methodical. It'll be more chaotic. It'll be a side effect of harassment. Dog damage is brutal. It's very, very difficult. I responded to a lot of these. Actually, there was a chicken farmer 2 years ago who was having chickens lost during the day. They had about 300 laying hens on pasture. I put up game cameras to see what was going on, and they were in an area where it totally could have been a mountain lion. They had a creek, right next to their field. They had a lot of great cover. Totally would have bought there being a mountain lion involved. I've seen mountain lions take chickens. I've had other cases where mountain lions are taking chickens and they're sort of treating it like a KFC and cruising by and taking a chicken every day. In this case, I got his neighbor's dog on camera with chasing chickens and with a chicken in his mouth. And what this guy said I thought was so revealing. And so I appreciated his honesty so much because I showed him this footage and he was like, well, damn, I really wish it had been a mountain lion because now I have to go talk to my neighbor about this. And that's the thing. When people talk about mountain lions, they talk about the mountain lions as belonging to the government or sometimes, belonging to advocacy organizations. But in reality, mountain lions don't belong to anybody. They're themselves. But dogs belong to people often, and then you have to have hard conversations with people. And I would rather not do that as well. We've had multiple mass killings of sheep since I started ranching for myself as an adult, and it's always been dogs. Every time. And I've been bitten by dogs that I was attempting to get out of our sheep pen. Actually, the worst dog bite I ever got was from a golden doodle, which is just embarrassing. But, they're big dogs. It was like 60, 70 pound dog that had already killed 3 sheep and was chasing sheep. And I grabbed it by the collar and it bit me real good. So it's something if you're a sheep rancher, um, if you're a small ruminant person, you're going to encounter that. That domestic dogs are a really huge ongoing issue. It's not always dogs. I'm not blaming dogs on everything, but it's dogs a lot. And it's important to be able to tell the difference. So feline or canine. So these are pictures. These are both real pictures from people that I was sent. Um, the one on the right, I was asked, is this a mountain lion print? And the one on the left, I was asked if this was a mountain lion print. Does anybody have well, it sort of gives it away because of which side I put it on, so I'm not going to play that game. This picture that I was sent is a dog. You can see the kind of triangular stacking of the pad, and the 2 front toes are more or less even. There's this kind of empty round space in the middle of the paw pad often where there's not with a cougar. Cougars, you get this kind of puffy M is the pad shape. You'll have like a slanted leading toe often, and you usually won't show claws. Every now and again, if the terrain is really slippery, you'll see a little bit of claw, but it's usually a very, very thin slice instead of these like kind of like pock marks that you get of dog paw prints. So the one on the left, I think that's a mountain lion. The one on the right, that's a dog. They're usually dog prints. So these are livestock attacks in Amador County. These are pictures that were shared with me, which I really appreciate. It's not easy to share these. So based on everything that we just saw, if folks want to put it in the chat, if not, I'll chime in. What would you what do you think? Having looked at what we've looked at, mountain lion, dogs. So, yeah, Joellen, thank you. This poor horse, I think, got harassed and got chewed up by a dog or dogs. And the reason why I think that is that typically dog teeth are fairly blunt. They'll often leave these kind of score marks in animal hide where they won't actually slice through the first layers of the skin. They'll leave a kind of a deep gouge, but that doesn't actually cut. And we see that here on the back of the hock, on the armpit. Those are 2 classic dog injury spots, and then on the face. And if you look at the kind of teeth pattern on the face, that looks like a dog to me. There's no grappling, there's no claw marks from dogs don't use their claws aggressively that way. So this little calf, to me, that plausibly does look like it could be a mountain lion. And the reason why I say that is that the wound is on the back of the head, which would not be an easy place for a dog to reach. And you can see that the cut is going through the first couple layers of the epidermis, and it's actually exposing some lower down layers of tissue that's much more consistent with a sharper claw or tooth, and it's in an area where you would expect to see that. And of course, the calf's hide is black, so it's harder to see, but I don't see a bunch of other little superficial marks. So yeah, I would totally buy that was a mountain lion attack on that calf. The thing about mountain lions and calves and mountain lions and cattle is that they are almost never successful with them. They may try with horses and ponies too, and with donkeys. But as we saw before with the USDA Wildlife Services chart, they're very, very, very rarely successful. There's actually a Panthera study going on down in the Bay Area of mountain lion predation on cattle ranches, and it doesn't seem like they're often predating cattle at all. They really they don't seem to. They're a little above their pay grade. So death causes. So we're looking at charts that come from USDA APHIS, and I want to be really, really clear about who these folks are. This is the branch of the United States Department of Agriculture that are the paid trappers. So these are folks who they carry out lethal trapping on behalf of private interests, on behalf of ranchers. So these are people who are not anti-trapping. They are pro-trapping. They are the trappers. And these are their numbers. So looking at this, to go through this chart, you can see that these are unintentional deaths. Let's be real. Most of these animals were born to be slaughtered. So we're talking about deaths that were not intended rather than deaths that were intended. And the vast, vast, vast majority, those deaths are intended. So beef cattle in 2015, only 1.1% are killed by a predator. The other 98.9%, there's a reason other than a predator that that animal died. For calves, it's 5.8, which means sometimes it does happen. And you've got to remember, this isn't mountain lions. This is all this is all predators, including dogs. So some of those calves were eaten by coyotes, some by wolves, some by domestic dogs, and maybe one or two by a mountain lion. 94.2% not from predators. Sheep, 19% of adults. That still means that 81% is bad weather, bad management, poor vaccination schedules, getting stuck in a bush. Sheep are, I respect the intelligence of sheep a lot. I really, really do. I think that they're really, really great at what they do, but they only do a couple things. And the old farmer joke about sheep is that they're born looking for a place to die. They do have a tendency to get themselves into situations where they get stuck in a bush and they die. So 81% of the time that there's an unintended death, it's not a predator. But then you look at calves and you look at lambs, and if you look at lambs, about 45% of the time that a lamb dies in an unintentional way, it is a predator. It's a dog, it's a raven, it's an eagle, it's a coyote, or it's a mountain lion. So you would think that you would want to put the majority of your resources where the actual threat is in protecting lambs. So it often boggles my mind when I drive through the vineyards and I drive through the fields in California and I see lambing ewes with tiny, tiny lambs and they're just out on pasture, without any deterrent system apparently in place. Clearly, there is an acceptance at a certain point that some loss is going to happen if you're not going to take action to prevent it. So only 20% of cattle producers are using any non-lethal tools. So if you come down to this chart on the bottom, only a little over half of sheep producers use any kind of non-lethal tool. So that's the thing we kind of come back to, prevention. If this is a bad enough problem that we need to have government employees trapping and killing wildlife, then it's a bad enough problem to do something about proactively before something happens. That is like where I come down on it as a sheep producer. It's like if I care enough about my livestock that I want the government to solve this problem for me, then I need to care enough about it to do something myself first. When you look at goat producers, 2014 goat producers, 93% are using non-lethal tools. So great job, goat producers. I think the thing about goats is that they are so difficult to contain and manage that you almost end up doing non-lethal, just by matter of course, because that's what it takes to contain the goat. So proactive coexistence is a long-term solution. These are my photos. And they're really poor quality because they're with my little dinky game camera that I had in my early 20s. There's been a lot of technology improvement since then, but that's a video of a mountain lion that walked right past my sheep and didn't cause any sort of problem. And there's probably a lot of reasons why. Could be the livestock guardian dogs, could be the electric fence, could be the ultrasonic scaring device, could be a bunch of stuff. But the fact that that line was there and cruised right by and then kept going was a huge turning point in my life of convincing me how well this works. Um, so this blurb in the middle comes from Washington, from the WDFW. They have this great pamphlet that we helped them with about coexisting with cougars. The only long-term solution to minimize injury or loss is to prevent access to vulnerable pets and livestock. They say it is possible to keep domestic animals safe using effective animal husbandry practices and proven methods to deter and exclude cougars. And the only long-term solution is to do it. And this is, again, going all the way back to the beginning. We tried extermination. It didn't work. Our only option is proactive coexistence. You can do lethal removal after the fact. It's not going to bring your animal back. And we have really, really good science that it won't make anyone safer and can, in fact, cause a whole host of new problems. So what we've got is proactive coexistence. So consider your ecosystem. Design choices. This comes from Cheetah Conservation Botswana. I love this chart of the unhappy farm. No crawls, so livestock are exposed to predators. A crawl in Botswana, it's called a boma in Zimbabwe, is a traditional structure. Traditionally, it's built out of thorn bushes. Folks are making modern ones with high electric fence, which I think is so cool and very portable. That's a night pen where animals are concentrated in a smaller area during the night, during the most vulnerable time, where they can be protected by livestock guardian dogs and excluded with fencing. That's either pokey because it's made of thorn bushes or electric, so it'll shock predators. But in an unhappy farm, there's no crawls, so animals aren't protected overnight. There's few trees and poor vegetation, which means there's not a lot of native wildlife for predators to eat. There's low production, there's livestock in poor condition. Livestock really know, when they're sick and they're not well and they're going to wander off to the edge of the pasture and get picked off. That is the design of nature. And predators know too. They will show up when animals are in poor condition. No livestock protection, predators are taking advantage. So what this chart is saying and expressing to these farmers in rural Botswana is essentially it's a management issue at its core. And that's not always fair. One of the things about this that is challenging sometimes is that it is such a collective issue. You can have a farm that is impeccably well managed, but it can be like a couple miles down the road from a farm that's very badly managed. And if you get predators that are used to visiting the badly managed farm, they're more likely to take a shot at the well-managed farm. This is one of those things where we're all individually responsible for our own places, but our outcomes are collective. So, it doesn't always happen that the people who are actually creating the problem are the ones who see the consequences. It is sometimes people who are doing a lot right, who are not to blame, who have the consequences happen. The only way to do this is on a community scale, because these are animals that exist on this very, very large community scale. So one of the most important things is to talk to your neighbors and community and to get into agreement collectively about how we want to do things, including telling your neighbors not to feed the raccoons and not to feed the deer. So this photograph is actually from a ranch that admitted to shooting cougars. And this was their lambing setup. Right behind it, you can see those trees and scrub. That's a riparian corridor. There's a creek in there. That is like a predator superhighway. These are completely open topped. They're just made of like sections of cattle panel and a little calf hut. They had their pregnant ewes in there to give birth. So you can see the problem with this. You have the smell and sound of birth. You have vulnerable newborns. You have vulnerable laboring ewes, open-topped pens right next to a creek corridor. That's really, really not a good idea. So part of it is thinking about looking at your environment through a carnivore's eyes. What do they see? You might see this is a nice, good flat spot to put these. That's not what the animals are saying. So again, referring back to that chart, the most vulnerable animals are going to be young lambs and goat kids. So taking extra measures to protect them, especially around lambing and kidding. I do not recommend open-topped enclosures. Um, they should either be in an electric fence or in an enclosed barn. And we can talk about that in just a minute here. So successful shelters, walls, roof, floors, and doors. So Mountain Lion Foundation is a little bit famous for this. We've built shelters for people. Um, on the left here, this picture of this livestock trailer with with goats in it. I helped folks up armor their livestock trailer. We used like pop rivets to enclose the open section around the top, and then they just use their livestock trailer as a barn at night, and that way they can move it around because, you know, they couldn't afford to install one the way that most people can't. That's a completely reasonable solution. We have plans for a low-cost mountain lion proof enclosure on our website. We sometimes help people put them in and install them, or help people, you know, often help people tighten structures they already have, because most people who are raising livestock already have something like this, and they might need help actually thinking through how a predator would see it and making it actually hold water, so to speak. And then here on the right, I wanted to include that too, because this is an example of making sure to size things appropriately, where this is somebody who was using chain link panels, but they were using very lightweight ones. And in this case, this wasn't a predator attack that kind of pushed the door off its hinges. It was actually the animals themselves. It was goats. Goats are Houdinis. So part of it is also making sure that what you're building is sized for the animals that you actually have, and that it's not just going to get destroyed in a season or two. And we help with that. That's something that we absolutely can help do. There are also operations where putting animals in overnight is not practical and doesn't work, and I don't do it. I don't have a barn on our ranch that is large enough to contain the entire flock every night. And I also practice rotational grazing, which is better for the sheep because it breaks parasite cycle, and better for the land because it gets a chance to rest and then regrow. But what that means is that the sheep flock is in constant rotation through around about 80 acres. So no, they don't go into a barn every night. We do other things. That is an okay conclusion to come to for a lot of folks, and we'll talk about those tools in some of the next slides. But in California, it was estimated to me by a CDFW employee that about 80% of their depredation calls are for people that have fewer than 10 animals. Part of that is because they're not getting calls from big ranches, because big ranches are just doing shoot, shovel, and shut up. But part of that is genuinely because people who have smaller numbers of animals are deeply attached to their animals. They may be newer to keeping animals. They may be keeping animals where they live, so they're more concerned about predators potentially hurting their children. They are having more issues. There are many, many, many more small livestock keepers than there are large farms as well. So we spend a lot of time talking about that 80% of people who have 10 or fewer animals. If you've got 10 or fewer animals, night barning or night penning is by far one of your more impactful options. Mountain lions absolutely can be active during the day, so we have to talk about daytime solutions too. But this is a really, really good solution for people with only a couple animals, and we'll help implement that. Deterrence methods. So carcass removal. This is a really important one. At the Board of Supervisors meeting, they were talking about routinely having 5 or 6 mountain lions eating domestic animal carcasses at the dump because they are just left uncovered. That is a huge problem. That is a massive problem. That is training mountain lions to eat domestic animals. They need a different solution for carcass disposal, and they need that right now. That's something to talk to the city about, or whoever is in charge of the county dump, because that's a problem. Removing carcasses is huge. And remember, this is from the pamphlet from Washington. For small operations, enclose your animals at night. Livestock guardian dogs, sheltered facility for lambing and kidding, just for that most vulnerable time. Uh, I really don't advocate pasture lambing. It's just not a good idea. So many things can go wrong. Electronet fencing, flaidry, turbo flaidry. So flaidry is just ribbons, and turbo flaidry is visible ribbons on electric fence. There's a lot of really good evidence that it works very well to deter wolves. There isn't as much evidence for using it to deter mountain lions. I really like electronet fencing, and we'll talk about that. Woven wire fencing, fright tactics or devices, hazing, human presence, temporary electric fencing. So basically, when you exclude, you're removing access. You're physically removing access to the animal by bringing it into a structure. Deterrence is just making it not worth the predator's time. It's changing their mind about wanting to take your animal. So light and sound scare devices, motion activated versus random flash. We also provide these to people who need them. And these are most effective at night. The fox lights on the right are only light, no sound, and they're not motion activated. They're on all the time. These are best for big operations. They were developed in Australia. They work really well on dingoes. They flash randomly, which prevents habituation. I've used these really effectively. You're not going to want to use these if you are in that kind of 5-acre situation where you're right next to your neighbors. The gadfly, on the other hand, uses sound and is also day-night activated. There are versions of this that you can set up to be effective during the day too. The gadfly in particular makes a terrible, terrible noise that mountain lions don't like. And I've successfully used a gadfly to stop a mountain lion from crossing an elementary school playground, which it had been prone to do before. By looking at security camera footage, seeing the way that it usually walked, and setting up a gadfly so that it would go off. It worked really well. So guardian animals. So specifically bred to protect, but can become prey themselves. Elderly or injured livestock guardian dogs should be brought inside. But they are the most effective coexistence method. I'm not going to go into them too much for the only reason that we have an entire webinar on our YouTube channel that just talks about livestock guardian dogs and other animals. So we don't recommend donkeys and llamas, and you can see a lot about why in that webinar. Guardians are an integrated part of the flock. It's not usually enough just to have a dog on your property, because mountain lions and other predators are really used to being near and around dogs. Remember, 16 million dogs. So most of them some people think that just having the smell of a dog around, no, most predators are used to that at this point. Temporary versus permanent fencing. I don't recommend people build permanent fencing. I heard that come up where people are like, well, it's not practical to build acres and acres of, 12-foot fencing. I agree, it's not. What we use is 42-inch flexible electric. These are my sheep and my dogs. Mountain lions can jump this. In my experience, they really don't like it. It makes an electrical clicking sound. It moves in the wind. Mountain lions that tend to be really neophobic don't like this. And if they touch it, they get shocked. And the one thing about this electric mesh fence is that sometimes when it works, it gets torn down because mountain lions and other predators will bolt kind of chaotically when they get shocked. So it has happened on electric fence that I've installed that a cat shocked itself and came down on the fence and ripped the fence out as it ran away. But in that case, it still worked and the fence was still usable. We just put it back up. So keep in mind, this stuff should not be the only barrier between your animals and like a busy highway, because sometimes it does get torn up when it is working, but it works quite well. So what we're trying to do here is respect the needs of wildlife, use awareness, and remember that coexistence is a relationship that requires adaptation. You need to work with the environment and the animals that exist where you are, and continue to tweak your system over time. And we're here to help with that. So please reach out to us. And that's one of my livestock guardian dogs, hard at work. And I know we were using the chat as we were ongoing. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to drop them in the webinar chat now. Otherwise, definitely check out the webinar that's up on our YouTube channel that is the deep dive on livestock guardian dogs and other animals. They really are the absolute most effective tool that we have. This dog in particular right here, I've seen chase a mountain lion away, and both he and the mountain lion were unharmed. You know, they don't actually have to make contact to have that effect. Um, and, you know, overall, there's a lot of talk about theory, but when you get into it, what we're doing is really, really simple, which is that we're just setting boundaries. And we're setting boundaries with wildlife in the way that they set with each other. You know, they mark out their territories and they have little scuffles with each other. But by and large, unless something happens externally to disrupt their system, they get along with each other. And that's what we're trying to do too, is just be part of that community of ecology of the animals that are on the ground in a given place. And we can do that in a way that everybody benefits. If you're killing wildlife that are coming to your farm, you're going to be doing it forever. I've talked to some ranchers who say that. They're like, I've been shooting coyotes for 40 years. So obviously I'm going to keep shooting coyotes. And it's like, if you've been doing it for 40 years, maybe it's time to try something different because clearly it's not working. So that's our theory here. There's a lot of tools that are out there. I understand that seeing mountain lions during the day is a particular thing that's happening a lot in El Dorado County and in Amador County. I would really recommend that folks who are having these issues reach out to me individually, and I'm happy to talk to you about your specific place and what's happening there. I really recommend that everybody get a marine air horn. They're like yay big. They're about $15. They're very, very loud. They're really, really effective. When I was bluff charged by a mountain lion, a marine air horn is what drove it off. I take them everywhere if I'm going to go into a depredation site. I think they're a great idea for anybody who's spending time outside and in the wilderness, because if nothing else, they can help people find you if you get lost. If daytime predators are more of an issue for you, we can do things like deterrent devices that work during the day that are sound based. We also do motion activated sprinklers, which work really well. Mountain lions hate those, as well as electric fence. And then I also do help people with livestock guardian dogs because they're incredibly effective and they're also a huge whole topic in of themselves and take a lot of time and effort to train and also take care of. Chago, who's here in this little video, is now retired. So, you know, we have a, you know, like 11-year-old livestock guardian dog who like lives in our house now, and his like young protege is out on the pasture. So you have to plan for that kind of thing. They become, you know, part of your crew and have their own set of needs and their own set of liabilities. But overall, what we've been doing with our flock, it's been working great for us for about the last 6 years. We have all sorts of mountain lion presence. We see them, we get them on our game cameras. Our neighbors have depredations. Actually, my next door neighbor had a goat killed just a couple weeks ago. And we don't. And we only do a couple of things to get that result. And I think a lot of folks could implement those same tools. You know, people say like it won't work here even if it works there, but I've done this all over the place. That's the benefit of being a contract grazer is I've done this in the steep, rocky, hot hill country. I've done it by the ocean. I've done this in more populated environments. I've done it in the middle of nowhere, and it's worked everywhere I've tried it. So it's at least worthwhile to try it where you are too. So thank you all so much for spending the evening with us. We actually have another webinar tomorrow, if you want to check it out on our website. I really appreciate y'all's time. And really, if you've got any lingering questions or if there's any way that I can help you, please email me. It's here on the screen and it's also on our website. So thank you so much and good night.